the great Craig Bell, and we've got a tremendous guest tonight. Craig is about to get us started.
Yep.
CB, you want to get this podcast started?
I'm just making sure. I want to make sure that we are live like we say we are over on Facebook and the Book of Many Faces.
That's right.
We want to make sure. It's always nice to know that we are live. I'm almost certain we are. I just want to make sure that I see that live button in the picture. And let me see right here. There we are. I see us live. All right. So, James Scott Campbell, let's get this podcast started.
Friends, to another episode of the At the Net podcast, powered by Tex-Mex Productions. Working the soundboards in the back of the house are our producers, D-Mac and Dave Brain. Time to say hello to your hosts, Craig Bell and AJ Shabria, as they're about to take us through 3 sets of tennis, talking life and all the news as it seems to them. Ladies and gentlemen, Craig Bell.
All right. Thanks to our At the Net podcast girl, the convivial Margot Carter. Really?
That she is.
Yeah, for that phenomenal. That's the word of the day. Phenomenal. Phenomenal introduction, and welcome fans of the great game. That's a good word, isn't it?
It applies to our intro, but it really applies to our guests.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Right. And welcome fans of the great game. You're listening to Season 1, Episode 125. Can you believe that? We're in the 125 mark now.
That's a bit of a milestone after 3 years of enjoying this.
At the Net podcast with always on my left is AJ Chabria, a.k.a. AJC, right?
That's me. And on my right, CB1, as we call him, that's the great Craig Bell.
And we're talking the great game of tennis this afternoon, not evening. I usually say evening, but it's afternoon, as it seems to us. Thanks also go out to our good amigos at Tex-Mex Productions. There was a brain sighting today. So
yes.
Dave the Brain, he was actually in Maryland. He was driving, actually. And so Carrie, his girlfriend, fiance, wife
now, right?
Yes. Yeah. They were going to look for a house. So we're not. I don't know if the Brain's going to be coming back, but at least thankfully technology is such that the Brain was driving around and helped us get on the podcast. So we did have a Brain sighting. So I'm on the soundboards and dials and making us look like real people, not the holograms that John and Dale thinks we are, right?
That we are. And Craig, thank you for not just co-hosting, but producing. Well done, buddy.
Also, be sure to like and follow us on FaceTube. FaceTube, you like that? That's a new one.
That's
a new one.
Portmanteau of media outlets.
Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Plus, check out our good work on Fireside, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor Breaker, CastBox, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, and Spotify. I made it. I took one breath, and I made it, AJ. Can you believe it?
It's your weekly COVID test, and you're good, pal.
I made it, yes. So basically, it's all the communication sites that kids find popular today, right?
Yes, sir.
And if you'd like to read the opening intro like the convivial Margot Carter, it's going to be tough to knock her off the podium, though. She's done probably, 124 of those intros for us?
She always gets chosen.
Yeah.
And we have so many others too, but send me a demo tape if anybody's interested, and we'll get you a script and we'll get it rolling.
Somebody that speaks the Queen's English always makes this podcast sound a little bit more official, right? So, but anyway, speaking of phenomenal, we have a phenomenal person, a friend of mine, and now AJ's. AJ met him via the Zoom that we're using just a few seconds ago.
Yeah.
But Dale Petroskey is in the secret square now. We can see him overlooking the Dallas skyline. It looks like in your office, right?
That's not a picture. That's the real skyline. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we've been talking to Dale about doing this podcast for several months now, and this day's finally here, and I'm so excited because I don't know where to start with Dale. We're going to learn a lot about Dale and what he's done in his life. It's unbelievable. I mean, and for him to play tennis, that's how I know him, is through the great game. We have a common link. Played some tennis. We were competitors yesterday. We played with each other in this game that is on Saturday mornings, and it's just been a lot of fun knowing Dale and getting to really talk and get insight from this man that we're going to talk to for the next few minutes. So, Dale, phenomenal.
My perspective is that I've read his name in so many things, from the White House to the Texas Rangers, the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York, and of course the number one chamber in the whole country, Dallas Regional Chamber. So
yes.
I've only read his name and I've seen his photo as the guy who won this huge trophy with you.
Right.
So I'm like beaming just getting to meet this guy.
Yeah, he carried me all the way to victory. Yeah, amazing things happen sometimes, AJ. The blind squirrel finds the nut every once in a while. But Dale, no, we really appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we'll get 3 sets in here in a few minutes. In the next probably a little over an hour, maybe. I know you have a timeline that we need to adhere to today, but maybe we can get him back too, because there is so much information that Dale has done in his short life, all the way from the White House to Dallas, Texas, Dallas Regional Chamber, all points in between. But tell us, we're going to start out with the first set segment. This is sponsored by Conga Sports, the First Green Tennis Network. How'd you get involved in the great game? I know you're from Michigan. What really got you involved in the game of tennis?
Well, Craig, I was a pretty good high school athlete. And I stress high school athlete. I was a good baseball player. I was an all-county baseball player in Michigan. I was a little second baseman who led off and stole bases and turned the double play, but, hit okay, but wasn't good enough to get to the next level. And I was a starting quarterback on my high school football team. I was a little wishbone quarterback. I'm only 5'8", 155, and so a small athlete. But I love sports. I played basketball growing up. I played hockey growing up. I loved all sports. And when I was a freshman in college, my girlfriend then, who's been my wife now for 44 years, said to me, let's start playing tennis. And so we would go out and we'd play some tennis. And I started to learn a little bit about tennis. I didn't know anything, didn't take a lesson really, but started to understand it. I bought Tennis Magazine. And I would look at the lessons in Tennis Magazine, and I'll never forget how I learned how to hit my backhand. Is because I had an ability to hit my forehand, a pretty traditional forehand, right? And the Tennis Magazine said, stand in front of the mirror and hit your backhand just like you hit your forehand. In other words, it was off my thigh, out front, and then turn it over, and so I learned how to hit my backhand back then that way. So I was self-teaching in tennis. And then then we got married and we were living in Lansing, Michigan, and we'd go out and hit the ball around a little bit. And then we moved to Washington, D.C. And, I started playing with some guys, and I started playing in a little league there. And I was about a 3-5 player, I would say. But I would, what I liked about that is, we play on Sunday nights. We play our matches on Sunday nights, but it would force me to practice once or twice a week leading up to that match. And so that gave me 3 days a week playing tennis, and I started to develop, a little bit better, learn how to serve a little bit. Although I will say the person who's taught me the most about a serve is Craig Bell. Seriously.
You are learning from the best. He's even into his late 50s and 60s, he's got a gun. It's a huge serve.
Yeah, so smooth, and he taught me about the toss, which has always been my problem. The toss was all over the place, and Craig taught me how to, put it up there in one place and without spin and so forth, and get it to the top and then come down on it. And so really, that's how I got to enjoy tennis. And then I played through the years with friends here and there. But when I got to Dallas, about 8 years ago, I started playing in this Saturday morning group called the SMIT. It's the Saturday Morning Invitational Tournament. And we did it at Bentry at Craig's place. And Frank Campbell, my great friend, maybe my best friend in Dallas, he organizes it. He's the commissioner. He puts the pairings together every week to make sure it's as even as possible. And we play. There are 4 teams, doubles teams, and we play the other 3 teams for a half hour each. And we play 9 games in each one of the sets. And then whoever wins the total number of games, or you can actually win by not having the most games if you win all 3 sets.
I see.
Yeah, and so we play that on Saturday mornings, and that gives me at least 1 day a week to get out and play tennis again. And so that's sort of my relationship to tennis. Always loved it. I always say that one of the most enjoyable things for me in life is hitting a tennis ball. I just love being at the baseline, just hitting tennis balls, coming at me from different angles, different spins and so forth, making the adjustments and trying to hit through it and try to be a good tennis player.
Well, he did really well yesterday. 8 winners, 8 winners. Not counting, and he was playing against me, and I felt really bad because the week before we won, and then he would do that to his partner, It's just, I felt really bad. He hit these winners on me,
Yeah, but you didn't tell the rest of the story, Craig, that you actually beat us.
Well, it was Chris Smith. It was my partner. It was all Chris. We had a great time. No, this Saturday morning invitational that Dale's talking about, there's some really just nice people. Everybody wants to win, but at the same time, it's more about sportsmanship, just getting out and having a good time. We went to lunch afterwards. Dale, I was a part of a little lunch crowd that went over afterwards. It's just really fun. That's what tennis is all about.
Would you describe it as convivial?
I would say conviviality at its finest. So not only convivial, but at its finest. Dale, sorry about that. That's a word that I don't know if you're familiar with Rick Steves, the European Travel Guide. He says convivial. I started picking up on it a couple of years ago. So that's become the podcast word that usually convivial. CB tries to keep it under a dozen convivial. So I think
the over-under is about 12 usually on a 3-set show like this.
So. But question though, when you played the great game, did you ever get a chance to play on the White House, tennis court? Did you ever get a chance to do that? Just out of curiosity.
I'll tell you a funny story about that. I was when I was in the White House, I was an assistant press secretary to President Reagan, and so there are 3 levels of positions in the White House. The top level is assistant to the president. So chief of staff is assistant to the president, right? The top level. The middle level is called deputy assistant to the president. And the third level is called special assistant to the president. I was a special assistant to the president, so I was the third level. And you could only play on the White House tennis courts if you were the top level assistant to the president. But I was a fairly decent tennis player in those days when I was younger. And so I would get invited by the deputy White House chief of staff. His name was Dennis Thomas. He was a great friend of mine. And he would invite me to play with him. And I'll tell you what was so fun. The White House tennis court is on the south lawn of the White House, but it's hidden by a lot of trees. And so what would happen is Dennis would call me up Thursday, and he would say, "Hey, President, Mrs. Reagan are leaving for Camp David at 3:00 tomorrow. Let's be on the court at 4:00. Yeah. Okay. So we go and we watch the helicopter take off for Camp David, and by 4:00 we were on the court. And I got to meet some wonderful White House staff members, senior level people, through Dennis playing on the White House courts. And it was really a treat. And I'll never forget, I'd be sitting there, all of 29 years old, and I would be playing tennis, and I would think, oh my gosh, the rest of the world is working on Friday afternoon, and I'm playing tennis on the White House courts. This is pretty darn cool.
Right.
So I only got to do that because of Dennis Thomas.
Neat perspective, and the fact that you got to do that is crazy.
Oh yeah, no, I was sitting there thinking about that. Did you ever play tennis with any of the Bushes? Were you able to play? Because I know he was such a phenomenal, proponent of the great game as well. So did you ever run into to George Bush?
He's great friends with Pam Shriver. Mm-hmm. That's his great tennis buddy, one of them anyway. But I never played with the Bushes, although I know the Bushes very well. But I'll tell you my story about tennis and the Bushes. President Reagan's, Mrs. Reagan, Nancy Reagan, our first lady, she was very close to her father. Her father was named Dr. Loyal Davis. Mm-hmm. And they were living out in Arizona, in Phoenix, Arizona. And he took ill one weekend, and Mrs. Reagan flew to Arizona to be by his side. And that left President Reagan alone in the White House. And the Bushes invited him to the vice president's residence for Sunday barbecue. And we took turns going with the president to various things. And so I drew the straw to go with the president to the vice president's mansion that day. And so we're driving over together, get out of the car. And Vice President Bush and Barbara dressed very casually. He's got a golf shirt on and slacks, and Barbara's very casual. But the boys, George W., and Marvin, and Neil, and Jeb, were all sitting on the steps on the front porch, dripping wet, having just come off the tennis court. They had their rackets with them, and they got up and said hello to the president. But that's the closest I ever got to tennis with the Bushes.
That's great, though. You suppose all four brothers played doubles?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, they're very close, and they're very competitive. So and they're athletic. They love sports. Yeah, so I'm guessing that they were playing doubles. Yeah.
So what took you backtracking just a little bit? What took you to Michigan State? Because I knew that probably out of high school, Michigan obviously is a big school. What was the attraction to going over to Lansing?
Well, when I was in high school, as I said, I was a pretty good baseball player, and I got asked to come up to Central Michigan to at least try out for baseball. I did not have a scholarship, but they kind of liked me and thought if I could go up there and keep progressing, I could play. And so I went to Central Michigan for 2 years, and, I did okay. I was not great, and I really realized that was the end of the road. I was not going to ever hit well enough to play Division I baseball. At the same time, my wife, my girlfriend, who later became my wife, was at Western Michigan. So out of high school, we went to the same high school. She went to Western Michigan in Kalamazoo. I went to Central Michigan in Mount Pleasant. So when baseball was ending for me up in Mount Pleasant, she said to me, why don't we, this is no fun being apart. Let's just merge. Let's be together. Let's merge at Michigan State. And so we both transferred to Michigan State, and that's how I ended up at Michigan State. And actually took a fifth year because some of my credits didn't transfer. So we both went to school for 2 years at our other schools, but then three years at Michigan State before graduating in June of 1978.
Yeah, well, it sounds like Ann was very smart, and you listened like a good boy, right?
Well done.
I learned early on to be smart enough to listen to her. Yes.
Right, and then after Michigan, what'd you do for a couple of years before you got to the White House? What were you into?
Well, it's a crazy story. I guess we have a little time, so I can tell it.
Yeah.
But, so we're at Michigan State, and I'm a journalism major and a political science minor. And we had, I had proposed to her, and we were going to get married in October of 1978, and we were graduating in June of 78. So a few months after we graduated. And my fifth year, my first 2 terms, I had full load of classes, but my last term I didn't because I only needed a couple of credits. And so I was we thought the best softball team at Michigan State. We had put together this team of great former college players. There were 500 intramural teams at Michigan State, big school, 40,000 kids at Michigan State at that time. And there were 500 intramural teams. The year before we finished second, we were runners up out of all 500 for the championship, and we lost by 1 run. And our mission was to come back that next year and win it all. So that was my only big goal in my last term in school was we were going to win the championship. Yeah. And so by the way, we didn't. We lost by 2 runs in the finals again. but anyway, I needed to kind of get serious about a job, right? Because I was getting married in October. So I went down to now just to give you a little geography here. Michigan State's in East Lansing. The state capital, right, is in Lansing. They're about 5 miles down the street from one another on Michigan Avenue. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, on Grand River. And so one day, I'm a wet behind the ears college kid, journalism major, and political science minor. And I went down to the Capitol by myself, didn't know anybody there. And I walked into the office of United Press International. They were the wire service.
UPI, yeah, big deal.
Yeah, UPI. And I walked in enthusiastically, and I said, "Hi, I'm Dale Petroskey. I'm a journalism major at Michigan State. Do you have any internships?" And I'll never forget this. There were 2 people sitting in that office. One was Joanna Firestone, who was the bureau chief, and Chris Connolly was the other guy. And they were banging on typewriters. There was no computers, though. They were banging on typewriters, smoking cigarettes. The ashes are dropping into their keys, And they just like robots. And they look up at me like, who is this kid? And they said, I don't care, whatever. You know, there's a desk over there. But they never stop doing it, right?
Wow.
So they're just knocking news out. Well, I would show up every day. They never had time for me. They were never giving me any assignments, but I would show up every day because, you know, I had an internship with the United Press International. They barely knew that I had an internship. I mean, they were giving me no instruction. However, one day they were doing the state budget, which is a massive undertaking for the newspaper, making sense of the revenue coming in, the spending going out, and all that kind of stuff. And that particular day, there was a motorcycle rally at the Capitol. And it was one of these where some motorcyclists didn't want to wear helmets. And their theme was, let those who ride decide. In other words, they didn't want to be encumbered by helmets. They wanted that breeze through their hair as they were driving down the road.
Yeah.
And so they circled the Capitol. And I tapped Joanna on the shoulder and I said, you mind if I cover that rally out there? She said, whatever. So bottom line is, I went out and I covered the rally. My story ended up being on the front page of the Detroit News, and their story ended up buried on page A6. and so they started paying attention to me a little bit. And I had a couple of other stories published, and it was a very short internship, 10-week internship. But I'm walking through the Capitol one day, which is where we worked, and the House Republican press secretary. There were 4 caucuses: House Republicans, House Democrats, Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats. Each one had one press secretary for that caucus.
I see.
And so the guy who was the press secretary for the House Republicans, his name was Dave Maxtell, he said, Dale, what are you doing after college? And I said, don't know. Need a job. He said, hey, one of my guys is leaving. I'd like to talk to you. I'd like to hire you for my staff. And that's how I got my first job. I was a very junior writer and media person for the House Republicans in Lansing. We had 40 members of the Republican caucus. The Democrats had 70. So we were deep minority in the legislature. And so he hired me, and I joined that staff. Now, here's the next piece of the story. We get married in October. And so for the next, my wife gets a job at the transportation department, which is right next door to the Capitol building. She starts at 7:30. I start at 9 o'clock. But I say, I'm not going to lay in bed till 9 o'clock to go to the office. I'll just get up with her, walk my new bride down to her job, drop her off, and go over to the Capitol and be there early, about an hour and a half early. Well, all right, 2 years into my job, one day, a young state representative down the hall from me walks in. I'm the only one there. It's about 8 in the morning. Nobody else started until 9 o'clock. Nobody else was early except me. He says, Dale, you're the hardest working guy here. You're always early. Okay. And I said, yeah, I try to be early. He said, listen, I want to talk to you about something. Now, remember, he's a 29-year-old state rep. He says, this is 1979. He says, I think Ronald Reagan's got a good chance to win the nomination and beat President Carter for the White House in 1980. If that happens, then my congressman, his congressman, will be chosen for the cabinet, David Stockman. He said Stockman will probably be energy secretary if Reagan wins. If that happens, that opens up that congressional district. And if that opens up, I'm going to run for that congressional seat to go to Congress. I want you to run my campaign. And I'm like 25 years old. I have never run anything in my life, but I showed up early for every day for work, right?
That was your qualification. Your one qualification. You were early for.
What do you think? And I said, Mark, if that happens, I'm in. All right. Thinking, no way all these dominoes are going to fall. Well, sure enough, every one of those dominoes fell. Stockman was asked to be not energy secretary, but director of Office of Management and Budget. So that seat opened up. Now, Stockman endorsed his campaign manager, who was Harvard-educated lawyer, 64 years old, one of the wealthiest guys in the district. It was an anointing of the next congressman. Well, my guy, State Representative Mark Siljander, 29 years old, a state rep, was running against this guy, and there were 5 others in the race. Bottom line is, I organized it. We conceded that he was going to win his county, and a state senator was going to win his county, but we wanted to finish second in those 2 counties. We were going to win all 5 smaller counties in between, and it's exactly what happened. We won by 181 votes, big upset, and that's how I got to Washington.
No kidding. Wow, what a story.
Congrats.
25 years old. Yeah.
Congrats. Well, that was really a neat background on how you not only got started in tennis, but in the career and in politics too.
So let me tell you, let me finish. Can I finish off that story?
Would you?
Sure, please.
Thank you.
So I get to Washington and find out that this young state rep, now congressman, was a better candidate than he is a congressman. He was there to play. He was not there. He was 29. You know, he was not serious about the work, really. And so 6 months in, now it's November. We get there in April. Now it's November. We go out as a staff, the guys and women that were on the campaign, and now we're on the congressional staff. We go out for pizza and beer one night on a Friday night, November. And they are complaining. I mean, they are not happy. They're not happy with the office, the way it's being run. They're not happy with him. And I'm not saying a word. And they turn to me and they say, Dale, you're pretty quiet. Now, I was a campaign manager. I got the most to lose here, right? They turn to me and say, you're pretty quiet. I say, yep. You know why? If you take a paycheck from someone and their signature is on that paycheck, you got no right to bitch. If you feel that strongly about what you're talking about, then leave. And by saying those words, I told myself at that moment that I was leaving. I didn't tell them, but I told myself. I went home and talked to Ann. We had been in Washington just 6 months. She was not working yet. I was brand new on the Hill. And I said, I'm leaving Mark's office. She said, what? She said, what are we going to do? You know, you don't have a job now? I don't have a job now. I said, we're going to figure this out. So a few weeks later, I'm walking through the halls of Congress, and I run into a guy, and he said, Dale, I hear you're leaving Mark's office. I said, yeah. I said, do you know of any openings? He said, the only opening I know of is Congressman Bill Goodling. And he says, Congressman Goodling, though, you know, he wants a chief of staff. You're too young for that. You've only been in Washington for 6 months. You don't know how it works yet. So sorry, that's probably not going to work for you. I went straight to the bookstore. You know, we didn't have these in those days.
Yeah, you had to read a book.
I went and got the Almanac of American Politics, which is sort of the Bible of Capitol Hill. And I looked up Congressman Bill Goodling, and I saw that his father was a congressman for 10 years before him. He had been in Congress for 10 years, never had a close race. He was from York, Pennsylvania, about 100 miles north of Washington, D.C. York and Gettysburg was his district, okay? Southern Pennsylvania, southern central Pennsylvania. So I did my research on him. He was an educator. He was a teacher, coach, guidance counselor, principal, superintendent. He went right up the ranks of education. And he was a ranking member, highest ranking member on the House Education Committee. So I take my resume, I redo my resume, I take it in on a Monday, I hand it in. His chief of staff, who was leaving to go to the State Department, that's what created the opening, said, I saw later, he wrote in the corner, Congressman, you should see this guy. So I get a call to come in on Thursday for the interview. I come into this interview and I've got there is no way I should be a chief of staff on Capitol Hill at my age and at my experience level. But when I started interviewing with Congressman Goodling, what I really started to understand was he needed a little juice in his life. You know, he did not have close races. He had been doing this for a while. What he was looking for was the next quarterback to coach. And what he saw in me was the next young quarterback. He said, I think this kid, I can just see the wheels going. This kid's got some raw talent, and I can turn him into something. And long story short, he hired me as his chief of staff.
Crazy.
I was the youngest person on his staff and the least experienced person on his staff, but I was the chief of staff. And so, in the first couple of months, I would say to him, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know. He said, listen, I'm going to teach you how to do this. Don't you worry. We're a team here. So he taught me how to become a chief of staff. And then what happened is I was there for 3 years. Okay. And we had worked out a deal that I would get him through one more campaign. And then I would go up to Harvard and get my master's from Harvard in public policy. Ann and I could go up there for a year and be students. And then I'd come back and work for him again after that. Well, in the meantime, he invited Larry Speaks to a dinner in his district. Larry Speaks was the president's press secretary. And Larry and I flew up together to this dinner on a little Air Force jet, little four-seater, so it was very cozy. And we just started talking about what was life like on the Hill, what was going on in the White House. I had never been to the White House before. And what's it like to work for the president? What's your day like being press secretary and so forth? And we just hit it off. And then we just found out that we both love baseball. And that really bonded us, right? So we get up to the dinner, have a nice time, fly home together. I write him a note, how much fun I had getting to know him. Hope we can see each other again. He writes me a beautiful note. And we don't talk for a year and a half. And one day in March of 1985, the phone rings in my office, in Congressman Goodling's office, and my assistant says, Dale, I've got Larry Speaks on the line. And I said, wow. And so I pick up the phone. He said, Dale, hey, how you been? Long time no talk. I said, yeah, doing great. How have you been? He said, listen, you're busy. I'm busy. I'm just going to ask you a simple question. How would you like to come work for the president and me? Wow. I said, what? I mean, a bolt out of the sky, like what? And he said, I always remembered our day together a year and a half ago. And I came back to my office the next day when I had my daily staff meeting. I held up your business card and I said, the next opening we got, this is the guy we're hiring. And he said, I'm being true to my word. So come on down here and let's talk about this. And so I said, well, I better talk to my boss. He said, you can, but don't worry, I'll take care of that. So, really? But that's how I got to the White House, basically. Wow.
Yeah. That's a good story too, isn't it?
Tremendous.
Yeah. No, we're talking with Dale.
All these things happened within, I guess, 3.5 years of each other. Yeah. Yeah. I went from being a junior press aide in a state legislature to the White House in 3.5 years. Yeah. Pretty crazy.
And you've had quite a ride since then, too, which is something we're going to get to in the second set. Craig Bell, who's the second set brought to us by?
That would be Circula app, the world's first platform, to unite sport and entertainment. That's Circula. So
love it.
Check that out. So that's our second set sponsor.
Good stuff. Well, here we are in the second set, and we've gotten Dale's background and how he got to the White House. What I'd love to hear is after the White House, first of all, what made you decide to exit that phase of your life and get into National Geographic, Baseball Hall of Fame, Texas Rangers? Give us a little insight on your journey from the White House to baseball.
Well, it's interesting. When I was in the White House, I'd been there for 2 years, and it now was March of 1987. The president, of course, was going to be there until the end of 1988. And so, we had a new baby on the way, our firstborn, Kathleen. And so I had to think about, okay, what's next? And I was making $47,000 in the White House, okay, back in 1986. And a position came open at the Department of Transportation, which was Assistant Secretary of Transportation for Public Affairs. So doing the press for the secretary, who at that time was Elizabeth Dole, Bob Dole's wife, and she later became a U.S. Senator from North Carolina, head of the American Red Cross, and so forth. But Elizabeth Dole was a very capable secretary, cabinet secretary, and the pay there was $75,000. So I could jump from $47,000 to $75,000 with a new baby on the way. So I got asked to apply for the job. I was offered the job. I was, interviewed by the United States Senate and confirmed by the United States Senate for that position. And so I did that for about 10 months until she left that position to go help Bob Dole run for president in 1988. And so, of course, when she left, that was really big news in all the papers and so forth. I get a call from National Geographic. My buddy from the White House, his name was Bob Sims. I was assistant press secretary for domestic affairs. He was deputy press secretary for foreign affairs. He had gone to the Pentagon to be Secretary Weinberger's spokesperson. I had gone to the Department of Transportation to be Elizabeth Dole's spokesperson. And now he gets hired at National Geographic to be the first ever senior vice president for communications. He sees the paper and he calls me up on the phone. He says, Dale, are you a free agent now? And I said, I guess I am. I hadn't even thought about it.
Right.
He said, come on over here and do this with me. Come on over to National Geographic. It's a great place. I think you'd love it. And so I went to National Geographic with him. And then while I was there, I loved Bob Sims, one of the greatest men I've ever known. And then I got very close to Gil Grosvenor. Gil Grosvenor was the CEO of National Geographic. His family had run National Geographic for 100 years. He was the third Grosvenor to run it. It was Gilbert Hovey Grosvenor for 56 years, Melville Bell Grosvenor for 26 years, and Gil Grosvenor was the third. That was my boss. They were all descendants of Alexander Graham Bell.
Wow.
Okay. And so Gil was my boss, and he made me sort of his chief of staff. I never had the title chief of staff, but he had me involved in everything. And so had been there for 12 years. Now I had been promoted to senior vice president. I was in the top 5 at National Geographic. I was the youngest of the top 5. I thought I had a shot to be president of National Geographic at that time. And the phone rings in my office one day, and it's my buddy who had a summer home in Cooperstown. And he said, Dale, there's a job you need to have. And I said, I already got the job I need to have. Right. He said, no, the way you love baseball, this is a different kind of job. How about president of the Baseball Hall of Fame? And I said, what? He said, it's open. And, you know, given your White House experience, your National Geographic experience, your passion for baseball that everybody in Washington knows about, you might have a pretty good shot at this. So I interviewed for it, and I was hired. I was hired to be president of the Baseball Hall of Fame, and started in July of 1999.
Well, congratulations. And you, in that capacity, you had so many encounters with all these great players and coaches and everything. Who stands out for you at the Hall of Fame?
Oh, gosh. Where do you start? Yeah. I've got so many stories and so many memories of great guys, and just loved them all, you know. But, you know, there are some, I guess, that are a little bit more, that I'm a little closer to than others. You know, Dennis Eckersley is one of my favorites because he went through the bout with alcoholism, and he's the most honest person I have ever known. I mean, if you ask Dennis a question, you are going to get the absolute whatever's here is coming out here, and he's not filtering anything. He's going to tell you the truth. And so I love that about him. I love Johnny Bench. You know, I loved Ozzie Smith, Cal. I love Cal. I love Nolan. You know, I mean, there were 60 living Hall of Famers there when I was there, and I knew them all like brothers. I mean, most of them had been to my house. I've been in their houses, and just, you know, you really get to know them on a deeper level.
Just out of curiosity, who was the oldest one that you were in touch with at that time? You said you had 60 Hall of Famers. Who was, you recall?
Yeah, Bobby Dorr was the oldest living Hall of Famer at that time. Bobby was in his 90s.
Okay.
I think he lived to 94 ultimately, but a wonderful man who played in the Pacific Coast League for much of his career. And, you know, I never knew much about the Pacific Coast League, but that was, you know, if there's a single A, double A, triple A major leagues in baseball, he said that guys who played in the Pacific Coast League considered it to be sort of a low major, you know. Right. And a lot of guys who lived in California just wanted to stay in California and play in California all summer. They didn't want to travel the country and play baseball. They wanted to stay in California and play. So a lot of great players stayed out there and played in the Pacific Coast League. Lefty O'Doul did. Joe DiMaggio had quite a run out in the Pacific Coast League. Bobby Dorr, And so I learned a lot about the Pacific Coast League from Bobby. Of course, then he went on to become the great second baseman with the Red Sox, and part of that whole group of Ted Williams, Dom DiMaggio, Bobby Doerr, and Johnny Pesky. They were the key to that 46 Red Sox team.
Tremendous.
Oh,
Yeah.
I can talk baseball with
Of
Dale.
course,
That's my
we love
second
the game. Yeah.
Besides tennis, baseball is my favorite sport, and Dale knows that. So we get in conversations. I just sit there and just marvel at the fact of all the things that he's come in contact with the sport that I grew up playing in Lawton, Oklahoma. Not very well, but
we've actually got two really interesting baseball-themed questions. Craig, what do you got there from either Nick or Rick?
Let's see right here. Let's go with Rick Eckloff.
Okay.
Let's see. Where'd they go? It shifted on me really fast.
Yeah.
Rick really asks an interesting question. Does he think, Dale, the claim that nobody is a first ballot Hall of Famer is false?
Yeah, I think that's false. Absolutely. But here's the crazy thing. There were a lot of guys who should have been sure bet Hall of Famers who were not. Joe DiMaggio didn't get in on the first ballot.
Really?
Yogi didn't get on the first ballot.
No kidding.
Yogi Berra.
It's crazy, right?
Yep.
So, yes, I think there are certainly first ballot Hall of Famers. And, Mickey Mantle would have been one, right? Babe Ruth would have been one,
Sure.
right? Certain guys just are a cut above. And by the way, there are some Hall of Famers who are first ballot guys who believe that they're a little bit special within that little fraternity. we're just a little bit of a cut above. You know?
You really do know them like brothers.
Yeah. And so, but definitely there are sure bet Hall of Famers. I mean, Derek Jeter is certainly a first ballot Hall of Famer. Mariano Rivera is a first ballot Hall of Famer, right?
Yeah, pretty good pitcher for the Yankees. Hated the Yankees. Hated those guys. My brother was always a Yankee fan, and I've told Dale, we lived on Baltimore Street in Lawton, Oklahoma, and that's the only affiliation I had connection was to the Orioles, was Baltimore Street. So I claimed Orioles because my brother liked the Yankees. But then the Orioles got really good, and we were talking yesterday at lunch, and we were talking about the baseball players in the Hall of Fame, and I was going to, Brooks Robinson was my favorite player of all time. And I know you know Brooks. Did you have the chance to talk with Brooks?
Oh, I know Brooks very well.
Yeah.
What a beautiful guy he is.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a wonderful human being. And I always say that there were four guys who are really four different Hall of Famers that are really the same guy. And they all came from that era. It was Brooks Robinson, Phil Necro, Al Kaline, and Harmon Killebrew.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
They were the most selfless, nice. If they said they were going to do something, they would do it. And if they couldn't do it, they would tell you, I just can't do that. And so they were the most honest, most forthright, nicest, most humble guys who were so grateful to have played the game when they played it. Even though they didn't make the kind of money these guys today do, they were just so happy they played in that era. And they really had a brotherhood, those guys.
Yeah, no, that was a special time in the 60s and the 70s. When I was growing up, watch a game on a Saturday afternoon, the game of the week. Oh, my gosh.
Who were the broadcasters? Correct.
Oh, but at that time, oh man, I'm gonna have to think here for a second. There was Mel Allen. Mel Allen. I liked it because he always did This Week in Baseball.
Yeah, Twib.
Yeah. Oh, that was such an awesome. So, I remember just Vin Scully. I love his voice. I mean, the great storyteller, and he always did things by himself, which I'm always dumbfounded how a guy can broadcast by himself, because that's really tiring. That's why I like having AJ here also too. We get some ideas going back and forth.
Oh, yeah.
But to do something by yourself, for that long, and he was so good at broadcasting by himself and just telling stories and backstories. Vin Scully was awesome. I just remember him from that.
Into his 90s. His 90s, he did it.
Yeah, in Los Angeles. I'd love for you to tell us some of your favorite broadcasters too. But please, continue. Yeah.
So when I was growing up, game of the week was Kurt Gowdy, and then his sidekicks were Pee Wee Reese and Dizzy Dean. And they were the guys. Then Monday Night Baseball came in the 70s, and it was Al Michaels And, I think Jim Palmer was part of that broadcast, and, at times Earl Weaver and so forth. But, not in the 70s, but maybe a little bit later than that. But anyway, I think broadcasting, the broadcaster in baseball is probably more important than in any other sport, Although I will say, I think Joe Buck now in both baseball and football has put his stamp on both baseball and football in a big way. And he'll be remembered for a long, long time as the voice of, a long stretch of both postseason baseball and Sunday football.
Did you ever meet his dad? Did you know his dad pretty well?
Yeah, I was at his dad's funeral in St. Louis. Yep. Jack.
Yep.
Loved Jack Buck. And when I got to the Hall, it was just before Jack had his major stroke. And then he lived with that stroke for 4 or 5 years. And I knew him mostly after the stroke. But he was a guy who always had a smile on his face, always had a twinkle in his eye, even though he had been ravaged by a stroke. But he was just a sweet man, Jack Buck. And again, a guy who loved baseball. Just the way
his articulation of sentence structure, it's so unique when you heard Jack Buck talk about the game and just broadcast. I heard a couple of his radio broadcasts. It's just like Harry Carey. Did you meet Harry Carey?
Never. No, Harry Carey was gone by the time I got to Cooperstown. Yeah, but Jack Buck, truly one of the greats. My favorite growing up, of course, I grew up in Detroit, was Ernie Harwell.
Yes, Ernie Harwell. That's right.
And Ernie Harwell was a fantastic broadcaster, probably underrated because he was not in New York or, KMOX in St. Louis or Vin Scully in Los Angeles. But he was unbelievable broadcaster, very creative, witty, and became a really dear friend of mine. In fact, Ernie died in 2011, and he had cancer, and he closed down everything in his life just to be with his wife for the last month or so. And he called me to say goodbye, and he called a bunch of his friends, and just a 10-minute conversation. Loved knowing you, loved being your friend. And thanks for everything. And Lulu and I are just going to shut it down now and until the end. But I just want to thank you for being a good friend. Really classy guy.
Yeah. We have another question here from another one of our viewers right now, talking about baseball. What are your thoughts on like Bonds, Clemens, McGuire? Those guys during that time. Is that are they Hall of Famers? You think, or probably is that something that maybe probably they did wrong?
My thinking has shifted on this issue. When I was at the Hall, I would say absolutely not. However, since I've left, there's no question in my mind that some of the guys who've been inducted have been on steroids, So if you've got guys in the Hall now who are on steroids playing, how do you keep out Barry Bonds, who was better than all of them?
Right.
Roger Clemens, who was better than any of those pitchers? How do you keep out the best players who are on steroids versus the lesser players who are on steroids who are already in? So I think that at some point, the Hall will figure out a way to probably, come up with some sort of a voting on those kind of players. Because, Clemens and Bonds are now off the ballot. They've run the course of how many years they could be on the ballot with the writers. But they may be looked at again at some point down the road, and I hope so.
Yeah.
And, I was totally against all of that when I was at the Hall. But there's no question to me that guys who are in the Hall now, some of them did take some steroids along the way.
Well, I mean, it's tough enough to hit a baseball, but Barry Bonds did it really well, and even before he took steroids. I mean, obviously there was a difference of you can look at before and after. Kind of didn't his hat size grow about seemed like his head went from like a 6 7/8 to like an 8 1/4 or something like that, and he got massive. And I mean, but he's still to be able to connect with a baseball, not a tennis ball, but a tennis ball and a bat. I mean, that's something really special, and that's hard to do. I think whether you're on steroids or not.
So let me give you a little perspective on this. I think it all started in the mid '80s. Okay, let me give you an example. There was a picture on the cover of Sports Illustrated of a emerging star who was fairly little at that time. And he hit 4 home runs that year. The next year he hit 35. okay, and got much bigger, okay? I think it all started about then, okay? Then in the late 80s, Robin Roberts, one of my Hall of Famers, was out in Oakland with Andy Etchebarren was coaching for the A's, and Robin was in the clubhouse and walking around, and he's seeing these gigantic guys, McGuire, Canseco, and all these guys. And he says to Andy, what is that? Those aren't baseball players. He says, that's steroids. This is the late 80s, okay? In the early 1990s, I think it was 92, the acting commissioner of baseball was Fay Vincent. Bart Giamatti had died. Fay was the acting commissioner. And he sent around to the owners a one-sentence note that said, from now on, steroids are banned in baseball. And he kind of slipped it under the door. Little fanfare, okay? But the unions would not allow testing of steroids until 2003. So you've got a 20-year period from the mid-'80s when they've been introduced until the mid-2000s when they could finally be tested for, that you could take steroids and never get caught. And so what does that mean? It means it's nice to say I wouldn't take steroids because, I'm an ethical guy, right? But it means that if you're not taking them and the guy in AAA is taking them, you may lose your major league job. The guy who's in AAA who's taking, maybe isn't taking him, but the kid in college is taking him. Now we might take that AAA job and get to the major league. There's an arms race that started with steroids that forced people to take them to stay competitive and stay in the game. I'm convinced that Bonds was not on steroids until he saw what McGuire and Sosa were doing, and they were getting all this attention by the nation. And he's saying, are you kidding me? They're not 1/3 the player I am, right?
Right.
And so I think that it was for him, it was one of those things like, I'm going to show him, So I think steroids is a very, there's a lot to it, but I think we need to, if we've cleaned it up now, I say we need to be a little bit forgiving from that 1985 to 2003 and just kind of think about it a little bit differently now.
Yeah, because there was a tough time, and if it's not illegal, it's legal. Then I guess it's open. I hate to say open season, but I can't think of a different phrase or terminology. It's still tough to do what those people do. They're above normal, average, players. I mean, gosh,
unbelievable. Yeah.
We have a really good question that kind of goes both with tennis and baseball from one of the folks. We know about your Baseball Hall of Fame background. Would there be something with the Tennis Hall of Fame? Should we do something that maybe that you saw that works really well in the Baseball Hall of Fame that we might be able to put towards the Tennis Hall of Fame, or vice versa?
Yeah, great question. I don't know much about the Tennis Hall of Fame, really. I've been there. I've been to Newport, Rhode Island, and I've seen those grass courts. They're beautiful. I guess I'd have to know how they run their induction ceremonies, and I'd like to know how people can become members of the Tennis Hall of Fame, and how do you get information to them, and so forth. I'd love to talk to anybody in the Tennis Hall of Fame and learn more and bounce around a few ideas if they're up for that.
So, do you think? Let me bring it back towards the playing. Is there a thought process? I guess when you're in the Hall of Fame, what really is a Hall of Fame person? Do you think what is it that gets them from a really good player to an excellent player that would elevate somebody into the Hall of Fame? But was there some criteria in your mind? I'm trying to think of some players right now. They're kind of nice players, but like David Ortiz. I mean, Big Papi was just inducted into the Hall of Fame. Would you consider him a Hall of Famer? No, well, I'm not. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you see where I'm going? Is there a criteria in Dale Petroskey's mind? I mean, because I like Big Papi. He was really good for the Red Sox, But then I start thinking about Babe Ruth. I start thinking about Mickey Mantle. is there a criteria?
For my criteria is
Yep.
excellence over a long period of time.
Okay.
So it's you might, here's a definition of most Hall of Fame careers.
Mm-hmm.
They ramp up for a couple of years, they're
Yep.
getting used to the league, then they go on a run for about 14 years of just league leaders in home runs, RBIs, average, stolen bases, wins, ERA, okay, and then they ramp down for a couple of years. You see a lot of careers that look a lot like that. There are some that are not like that. Koufax was not like that. Koufax Sandy only pitched in the major leagues for 11 years.
Right.
But for those 4 years, from 1963 to 1966, untouchable. Really, four no-hitters, a perfect game. ERA title for 4 straight years. He was winning 25, 27 games a year. And so he was like, he started slow, took him a while, and then he ended like this. And then at the age of 30, he retired because his arm was just shot. And so he had a different kind of career than most. But most are ramp up for a couple, long period of excellence, and then ramp down a little bit.
So like Clayton Kershaw, in our, we're watching him.
Kershaw is at the top of the list. He's a Mount Rushmore kind of player. He's he's got the lowest career ERA of any starting pitcher in the history of baseball since Walter Johnson.
That's a long time.
His ERA is a 2.42. Johnson at a 2.17, but that's back in the teens.
Yeah, right.
That's like 100 years ago.
Right.
So people, when they watch Clayton, they don't really realize, because guys give up a run here and a run there and a home run here. And you say, he's not that great. The body of work, though, what a pitcher is, it's over a long period of time, and you see what happens. And Clayton he's Mount Rushmore,
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, he'd be a first ballot Hall of Famer.
He may be close, like Rivera, to a unanimous selection. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So good stuff. So those are some interesting questions that we had from folks out there that are paying attention, watching the podcast today.
Yeah.
So we appreciate everybody chiming in on that. So
as we round out the second set here, Dale, we'd love to hear about this amazing award that you just garnered this past week up in Indianapolis. You are the CEO of the top chamber in the nation. How did that happen? And what's the current and future project that you'd like to talk about with the DRC?
I'm so proud of our team and what we've built here. I've been here 8.5 years, and we've just built a culture of excellence and high standards. And we hire only the best. We hire subject matter experts. We build a great culture of teamwork and fun and mutual respect. But we work in 4 areas. We work to bring companies and jobs to town. And that's really the number one thing we work for. And in the last 12 years, 200 headquarters have moved to the Dallas area. 200 companies have moved their headquarters to Dallas in the last 12 years. That is crazy. No place in America that's even close to that. And 1.3 million new jobs in that time. So if our goal is to get more companies and more jobs to town, we're here and the rest of the nation is way down here, really. So that's one, economic development. In order to be successful in that, though, we need to do 3 other things. Education and workforce. We need to make sure that everybody in this community has a chance for a good education so they can have a good job and a good life, okay? The second thing is public policy, making sure that our business climate is strong, low taxes, reasonable regulations, and welcoming. And then our third piece of this is diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we live in one of the most wealthy communities in America, and right next door in southern Dallas County is one of the poorest communities in America. And until that gap is closed, we're not going to reach our potential as a community. And so we work in those 3 areas in order to make economic development and prosperity for all, what it should be in the Dallas region. And so we're very, very excited about what we do every day, and really, really proud of our team, our board, our membership, and our partners in the community.
Besides what you all are doing, obviously it's great. I mean, I've talked to you for a number of years. I'm just always dumbfounded about Dallas. I'm like, wow, Big D is definitely Big D. Where do you see this thing going? It's not stopping, right? As far as what you all forecast and see in the future, 2030, 2040, 2050? Are there any things on the horizon that you might be able to, it doesn't have to be breaking news, but just, kind of an overview?
I'll give you a couple of numbers. Before the pandemic, there were about 30 companies interested in knowing more about Dallas because they might want to move here. All right, 30 before the pandemic. Now, a little over 2 years later, 126 companies are interested in moving to Dallas because they see the prosperity here. They see that Toyota's moved here. They see that Charles Schwab has moved here. They see that McKesson's moved here. They see that CBRE's moved here. And they sit up and say, what am I missing? Wow. Yeah. If those guys are smart enough to move there, maybe we should be thinking about moving there too. And so it's gone from 30 to 126 during the pandemic. And I think a lot of that is people on the East Coast and the West Coast, they want out. They want out of those business climates. They want out of the population density. They want to come here, spread out, send their kids to good schools, have good jobs, have low taxes, no state income tax for the workers, very few taxes for the businesses. And this is a good place to come and live a good life and do business.
So as a follow-up, do we have the infrastructure? Or do we have all these people?
Those are the things we work on. Yeah. It's not a static thing. As we grow, we work on roads and bridges and water and all those things to be able to handle all the people that are coming here.
Yeah, because I mean, just to watch this in action. When I took notice when I think you told me the PGA was coming here, and I was like, the PGA. I mean, they're in Florida. I mean, they've been so ensconced in. When you think of golf, when you think of the PGA, that was kind of their headquarters for 50 years or more, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you said, they're moving to Frisco, and I'm like, what? I go, the PGA headquarters. I took notice at that, and I was like, man, that is a change of thought, attitude about Dallas. Because there for a long time, Dallas, I don't know, would say we've had some history before we got here of some things that haven't been favorable about Dallas. Now the TV show was obviously big, but there were a couple of things that Dallas wasn't really highly profiled. But when you said that, I was like, my goodness, I can't believe, then like I said, Toyota coming here and being able to be a part of this and watch the tollway, become a center of activity. Just, people going back and forth up and down the tollway like they do now. That's incredible.
I'll give you another one. Just happened a couple of weeks ago. It's Caterpillar. Caterpillar for years was an Illinois company. You couldn't get them out of Illinois. They were first in Peoria, and then about 5 years ago they moved to Chicago. And they just announced they're moving to Dallas. And so it's like the PGA. These are places. Charles Schwab, San Francisco. Oh, my goodness, that's, everybody knows Charles Schwab in San Francisco. Now they're in Dallas, right? So people are changing their views, and they're moving here.
Yep. People literally find this place hot. Like it is outside.
Literal.
Yeah, it's not too bad today. It's only 102 on my watch here, so that's a cool day. We're having a cool front. It's 102.
I love it.
It's cool enough for Frank and me to be playing golf today, Craig.
There we go. You and Frank, I love it.
Yeah, getting out there. So, should we go to the third set?
Fun second and first sets. And who's the third set sponsored by? Craig Bell.
Third set is always sponsored by our buddy Blair Descaray with Master Systems. Anybody looking for any type of court work, on court, off court, nets, to you name it, court construction, our buddy Blair Descaray is the man to be seen with Master Systems, right? Don't you think?
Absolutely, remarkable guy and a great company.
All right, Dale, you ready? So here we go. Third set. We're gonna go real fast here. We know you probably like music. Are you a music guy? You're from the Motown area up there.
I do. I do love music. Yes.
First band you saw in concert?
Gosh, I think America.
America, really?
Yeah, but we went to see the Elvis movie the other night.
Uh-huh.
And Ann said to me, "Did you ever see Elvis live?" And I did. My dad took my older sister and me to see Elvis live in 1970 in Detroit at the Olympia, where the Red Wings used to play. And I had totally forgotten that until the movie. And And he was wearing his white jumpsuit back in those days, and it was sort of the older iteration of Elvis.
Right.
But so I did get to see Elvis. I saw Neil Diamond live early on, and so forth. Yeah.
But America, at the same place at the Olympia, did you see? Is that where?
Yeah, it was somewhere one of the music halls in Detroit. I can't remember exactly where.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, we haven't had America. You know,
No, yeah,
you know
I love
America.
that.
AJ knows all the music. This is
You know who they
unbelievable.
are? Do you know who America is?
Oh yeah,
I certainly remember Horse with No Name was the big hit.
right.
There you go. That was the biggie. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were. You know, AJ comes up. We've had a lot of people talk about music, and I'm sitting there going, "Who are they talking about?" And AJ goes, "Oh yeah, they got this song, and that's guys." And I'm like, "No, there is no way." Yeah, he knows this. So, who's your favorite band or music, or what do you like to listen to, and that kind of
All
thing?
right. So as a kid, my favorite musician or my favorite entertainer was Neil Diamond.
Neil.
Oh,
Loved
really?
Neil Diamond. In fact, loved Sweet Caroline way before it became a famous baseball anthem.
Right.
And I'll tell you a story about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, the Red Sox are the ones that play it, right? Mm-hmm. So John Harrington was the CEO of the Red Sox for many years. He worked for Mr. Yawkey. The Yawkeys owned the Red Sox. And John was the CEO, and he was on our board at the Baseball Hall of Fame. And he said to me, "Dale, did I ever tell you the story about how Sweet Caroline came to be with the Red Sox?" And I said, "No." And he said, one night we had Senator Ted Kennedy at the game, and he was bringing his niece, young Caroline, to the game. And they were sitting in the front row. And I sent a note up to the booth that in the 8th inning, I want you to play Sweet Caroline. And I want the crowd to stand and honor Caroline. And they did. And from that moment, they have never stopped playing Sweet Caroline in Boston.
Really? Didn't know that.
Tremendous. That came from the Kennedys, Caroline Kennedy.
It came from the Kennedys, and it was the Neil Diamond song. So Neil Diamond was my favorite as a kid growing up. I liked a lot of different folks, James Taylor and lots of others. My favorite now, of course, is George Strait, though. I've become a big country fan, and I love George Strait. And in fact, I'll tell you how that happened. I was in the White House, and there were 3 guys who were 10 years older than me. Larry Speaks, who was the press secretary, Rusty Brashear, and he was from Mississippi. Larry's from Mississippi. Rusty Brashear was from Tennessee. And Pete Roussel was from Houston, and they were my mentors. They were 10 years older than me, and I was like their little brother. They were like 3 brothers, and I was their little brother. We did everything together. And I was from Michigan, but they taught me country music. And from that moment on, from the mid-'80s, I've become a big country music fan. And, of course, my favorite is George Strait. And I also like Alan Jackson.
Wow, there we go. Now, speaking of bands, all right, this tells a lot about personality. And you might have been in a band, and we're just wondering, all right, would you be the lead singer? Would you be the guitarist? Would you be a bass player, drummer, piano player, glockenspiel player? I'm a glockenspiel player, Dale. I play the world-famous glockenspiel. But where would Dale Petroskey be in the band?
Wow, that is a tough question. That's the toughest question you've asked.
Hard-hitting,
Yeah, I don't know. I would not be the lead singer. Let's just say that.
Well, hypothetically, this is hypothetically. Yeah. Would you want to be like a Neil Diamond?
Would I want to be the lead singer?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
No?
That's too much pressure.
I can see you being a front runner out there, just being the lead guy. What would you like to do? Would you like to be like a piano player like Neil Diamond, just sit down and tickle the ivories a little bit?
Yeah, probably a guitarist.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite guitarist, just out of curiosity?
Brad Paisley.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Another country guy.
Yeah.
And Western.
Great one. Probably the greatest, probably one of the greatest guitarists in the world, isn't he?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes. What do you think, AJ?
I mean, I haven't heard him enough, but I know a lot of country singers sing and just play rhythm and acoustic. Paisley's unbelievable, and he does a lot of different things with that thing, with the axe.
Yeah. I saw him live at Clayton Kershaw. I'm on Clayton Kershaw's board, foundation board. And so we have an event every year in November after the season here in Dallas at the Rustic. And he always has a big country. He had Toby Keith a couple of years ago. We had Brad Paisley last year, and he came and played. It was unbelievable. I mean, it was so great.
So you do a little air guitar in the office every now and then, Brad Paisley singing a song. All right, we're going to go into the second part of the third set here. First paid job. What was your first paid job? Do you have a little paper route up there with the Detroit, Free Press?
Free Press?
No, well, I did have a paper route, but it was with the little weekly paper. I guess technically that's it. I made about $4 a week.
Uh-huh.
But my first job, and this kind of portended what was going to happen later. I was 12 years old. I loved baseball. I played baseball every moment I could. If I wasn't playing, I was listening to Ernie Harwell. I was watching on TV. Well, I got a chance to be a volunteer boy usher at Tiger Stadium at the age of 12 with my buddies. And I would take the bus down Michigan Avenue to the stadium, probably a half-hour bus ride down. And we would get in the stadium for free. We would help the older ushers fold things and get chairs situated and so forth. And then when the people started coming in, they would hand you their ticket and you take them to their seat and you would wipe off their seat. And if they wanted to, they could give you a tip. They didn't have to, and some didn't. But many people would reach into their pocket and give you a quarter. And so I would make about $2 a night. But I got to see a major league game. It was fantastic. And I really got a chance to see how a season goes because I was there every night. Yeah. I would see, how game one of a series affects game two, affects game three, affects game four. And I really started to understand the game at a fairly young age that way, just by being in the stadium. And I'll tell you one follow-up to that. In 2001, I'm now the president of the Baseball Hall of Fame. And I'm on the field in Detroit for the All-Star game. And, because when you're president of the Hall of Fame, you can go anywhere, basically. And so I'm on the field for all the pregame festivities. And now they're getting us off the field because they're getting ready to start the game. And at that moment, as I walked off the field, I saw a young female usher. And I had a moment of like, oh, my God. That was me. That was me as a 12-year-old. And now I'm president of the Baseball Hall of Fame. This is the craziest circle of life thing that I've ever come across. And I reached into my pocket and I pulled out a $20 bill. And I asked her to take me to my seat. And I handed her $20. And she looked at me kind of, quizzically. And I explained the story to her. I said, I was you a long time ago at Tiger Stadium. And I just want you to have this because this is a great moment for me. And so it was a kind of a full circle moment for me.
Oh, that's a great story. Wonder what ever happened to that little girl.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So
but she's 22 years older now.
Right. So question, you made me think of something. You said you could go anywhere in baseball. Have you been to all of the ballparks?
When I was at the Hall of Fame, the only park I had not been to was Kansas City.
Oh, really? Okay.
And for no other reason than it just never came up. But there have been new ballparks built since then, though. The new ballpark in Atlanta. Who else has a new ballpark since I left? I go down the list.
Was that Camden Yard? Was Baltimore?
Oh yeah, Camden Yards was the early '90s.
Right. Yeah. So it was okay. So,
anyway, there are a couple. There are a couple that have been built since, but I was at all of them except Kansas City.
Kansas City, really? Yeah. Have you still not been to Kansas City? Have you?
No, I have not been to Kansas City yet.
That's the only one, right?
Yeah.
We may have to drive up there.
Oh, that's right. We have to take a road trip up to Kansas City. That's not that far away.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
And they've renovated it. They made it a nice ballpark.
Yeah. Wow. I was sitting there thinking about the Royals the other day. I looked up on Wikipedia because I know they won the World Series. Was it about 7 years ago, that team? Yeah.
Something like that.
Something like that, yeah. I just like their royal blue. Those uniforms, they were really crisp, kind of like the Dodgers.
Yeah.
Dodger white, Dodger blue.
Yeah,
and that.
They're very similar to the Dodgers, yeah.
Yeah, there's certain uniforms. I wish tennis, we had something like that. We're watching tennis right now in my office. There's a monitor up there. There's something about baseball or team sports that really have a really because everybody's dressed the same, everybody looks the same, and tennis. We're trying to be different.
Yeah, I love Davis Cup or Laver Cup, where Team Europe will wear that royal blue like the Royals or Dodgers,
right? And
red is the color of the shirts on the Team World.
They all walk out and they're all in the same. You just feel like a team aspect. Yeah,
exactly.
But is there a favorite ballpark that you?
San Francisco.
San Francisco.
Oh, the
really?
new one, or Candlestick, or the new one?
No. I think Candlestick was the worst, and I think the new one is the best. Yeah. No, the new ballpark is so beautiful, and it's right on the water. And so it's one of those where you're better off sitting in the second deck rather than the first deck because you get a view of the water, McCovey Cove, out in right field. I love the brick. I just love the way they've done it. They have for their concessions, they have the best restaurants in San Francisco. All have like the Chinese food is from a certain restaurant. The Italian food is from Aliotto's. There's sushi from this restaurant. They don't have a concessionaire to do all the stuff that tastes all the same. It's all like that. They have a female announcer, Renelle, who's she's from a local radio station, so that gives it a different flair. I love the fact that when you walk into the ballpark, everyone who greets you is in a wheelchair. So they figured out a way to get the entire community involved in that ballpark and that team. So they've taken care of the handicapped. They were the first to have a female announcer. They use their best restaurants. They just designed it beautifully. I love San Francisco ballpark.
Have you been to the AJ's from around that area?
I haven't been to the new one, and one of those
stick?
things that I'd always want to do is to be in a kayak and catch a home run.
Oh, yeah.
That would be crazy. You don't even see the game, but you get that honor.
Do they have a screen there for you so you know it's coming?
They do.
Out
They
there,
do.
so you can say, "Oh, here it comes." Yeah.
They do. So cool.
Yeah. So you've had a Dodger dog before.
Oh yeah.
And
I like Dodger Stadium.
Do you like that?
Nice.
Yeah, that always looks cool. I always wondered who that guy was who was pointing the radar gun in the white hat fedora. You remember about in the late 70s, early 80s? I looked him up also, too. I was like, because you always would see him there. He'd hold the radar gun and in the fedora. It was pretty funny. There's just certain ballparks that
unforgettable images.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, right. So have you sang Take Me Out to the Ball Game at Wrigley, I guess, in the 7th inning? Have you done that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Been to Wrigley. Thrown out first pitches in several ballparks.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Before major league games. Yeah.
Tell us the great story about was it Bush that he was talking to Jeter about when he threw out the first pitch? Do you remember that particular story? He was nervous, wasn't he, about throwing it out?
Yeah. Well, that was right after 9/11.
Right.
It was the World Series, and it was the first game of the World Series in New York. And I was there, and when we went through magnetometers, it took an hour to get through magnetometers that day. And they told us, do not even have a little foil for gum in your pocket because that will set off the magnetometers.
Wow.
It gets everything out of your pockets. So we went through. There were snipers on the roof of Yankee Stadium. Very worried about what might happen at that moment, but the president wanted to go out and do that. He had a flak jacket on underneath his New York Fire Department pullover. And I was in the front row. I was in the first row there that night. And, of course, he threw a strike. He fired a strike. I mean, it was about 70 miles an hour, which most presidents will lollygag it up there. He threw a strike, and it was belt high. It was beautiful, right? Well, then you hear the story later on that he was warming up down below in the cages, and then he went out to the dugout and he was kind of getting ready to get introduced. And Jeter said, "Where are you going to throw from, Mr. President?" He said, "I'm going to throw from in front of the mound because it's level. The mound is a mound. It's hard for the average person to throw off a mound, right?" And he said, "I'm going to throw." And he said, "Don't do that. They'll boo you. They'll boo you in New York." He said, and so the president said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." So he threw from the mound. And just before he went out there, Jeter said, "Don't bounce it, Mr. President." No pressure.
Right.
No pressure.
Right. The captain saying, "Hey, don't throw it from." Yeah.
Have you seen The Captain yet?
Oh, it's popular right now. I still haven't seen it. I can't wait.
I've been watching it. It's very good.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend it. Very good.
Yeah, Derek Jeter, quite a legend up there. One of the most beloved Yankees, also of this generation, I would say, wouldn't you?
Oh, the most beloved. Yeah.
Even Yankee haters like and respect Jeter.
How can you not?
Yeah.
Now, there's a guy who did not take steroids. I can guarantee you that.
Is he as beloved as, Maris and Mantle and all those guys, Yogi? Do you think, is he up there on the Mount Rushmore with them?
Yeah, he probably is. Yeah, he probably is. Yeah, in a different era. I mean, Maris and Mantle and Yogi, they had baseball dominated America.
Right.
They weren't competing with the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, tennis, golf. It was kind of all there was. That and college football and horse racing. That was it. And boxing. But baseball was the only sport in the summer, and it was the only sport that was every day. And so people paid a lot of attention to it. And of course, we were a nation of immigrants, and a lot of the players who played at that time were immigrants. I mean, and so, or they had Italian last names or Irish last names, or, a little later on, Latino.
Yeah, Spanish last names too. Yeah, Latin.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, all right, breakfast, lunch, or dinner? Are you a breakfast guy, lunch guy, dinner guy?
That's an interesting question. I guess dinner. I don't eat breakfast very much. I rarely eat breakfast, in fact. But I eat two meals a day, usually eat lunch and dinner.
Well, that leads us into our next question, which is kind of a Mount Rushmore question. But we know AJ and I, we're going to have this. You're going to have a party, and you're going to invite some people from. It can be from Adam and Eve all the way forward. It can be virtual people in the metaverse.
It can be fictional literary characters.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and it can be anybody, and from sports to arts to academics to to whatever. We know AJ and I would be invited to the soiree, as we say in Oklahoma. Who is Dale Petroskey inviting to a party of at least 4 names, maybe, or more? It could be whoever.
Yeah, I'd say Warren Buffett.
Okay.
I'd say Barack Obama.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
Bill Clinton.
Okay.
Let me think about that last one.
So have you met these 3 people before? I'm interested to know that.
I do know Warren, yes.
Okay.
I have not met President Obama. I have met President Clinton.
Okay.
Let me think about my 4th here.
And it could be more. It could be,
Yeah. I got to think about who would be good conversationalists. That's why those 3 have been chosen.
That's quite a mix. I love it.
Yes.
Yeah, because they would be great conversationalists.
Right.
Gosh, Tiger Woods.
Tiger Woods. Interesting. Okay.
I'd say Tiger Woods would fit right in, and he'd be a pretty interesting guy. Yeah.
So what are we eating at this?
Yeah, what a group. What are you and Ann serving?
Right. Are we having a traditional Texas barbecue, or are we going to go more the Italian food or sushi?
Yeah, I think we probably go Texas, right? I mean, if we're going to do it down here, let's do it up.
Right. Right. East Coast, West Coast. Are you East Coast guy, West Coast guy?
I do like the West Coast. I do like a lot of aspects of California. I do like the water, the mountains, the vibe, you can play sports all day, every day of the year. I love that about it. I guess West Coast more than East Coast.
Kind of would you be more down L.A., San Diego, that kind of part of the West Coast, or up more like San Francisco?
I think more like Santa Barbara.
Oh, Santa Barbara. Okay, yeah.
North of L.A., which is outside of L.A., but it's just when I worked for President Reagan, we got to spend a lot of time in Santa Barbara, and it was my first time ever in California. And I used to say to myself, I used to look around and say, "This must be what heaven looks like. This is like the most beautiful place on earth." And so I think Santa Barbara, which is not in the city, not in any city, it's sort of to itself, but it's still beautiful area.
Yeah. Mountains or beach? Are you a mountain guy or a beach guy more?
Oh gosh, I guess mountains a little bit more than the beach. I love the mountains. I love getting into the mountains.
Are you a winter mountain person or more of a summer mountain? Because there's.
I think summer mountain. Yeah.
Sunrise, sunset.
Sunset. We have my family has a beautiful home on northern Michigan, on Lake Michigan.
Oh, wow.
and you wouldn't believe the sunsets at night. They are bright, bright orange. And we, we kind of stop our day at a certain time every day and just kind of make sure we don't take it for granted, that we appreciate it every day. So sunsets.
I'm going to shift to the third set really quick because I know we're on a time frame here, and I don't want to.
That's right. Yeah, third set of the third here as we wind down.
So, third set of the third set, right here. All right. Indoor tennis, outdoor tennis.
Indoor tennis.
At Bentry Country Club.
Bentry. Don't like to contend with the sun or the wind.
What's your favorite surface? Do you like a hard court? Would there be or an indoor clay court? Because there is indoor clay.
Of course.
I do enjoy clay. Yeah, I got to play when I worked for President Reagan. In fact, out in Santa Barbara once, I got to play on grass for my only time, and that was really fun. And but yeah, I like clay.
So leading into this, what's your favorite tournament? Is it the French Open or like the U.S. Open or
Wimbledon?
Just Wimbledon. That's the one, huh?
That's the one. That's the one I really pay attention to more than the others. And, it goes back to my days of breakfast at Wimbledon with Dick Enberg. And hard to beat those days, right? When Saturday women's final, Sunday men's final, and all the tradition and it just felt great. It just felt good.
And we mentioned broadcasters in baseball, Bud Collins, Dick Enberg. These were the voices of tennis. Even the music was so beautiful when they introed it. NBC's Breakfast at Wimbledon. Oh my! As Dick would say.
Dick was a good friend of mine.
I'm
very
sure.
Good friend of mine when he passed away. In fact, the day he died, I received his Christmas card. In the mail the day he died. Yeah, it was
he was a great broadcaster.
He was a great broadcaster. He, I'll say something about broadcasters, tennis broadcasters, though. I am impressed by how John McEnroe has developed as a broadcaster. I think, he was so fiery and so profane as a player. Yeah. And he's still got that edge to him a little bit, but he speaks the truth. And I love that about him. And I love the fact that he even calls out the bad behavior now. Like, how can that guy do that? And I'm thinking, John, are you remembering the day?
Right, you cannot be serious, Dale. Last two questions. All right, last two questions here. Who are your favorite tennis players? Who do you like to watch, or
And this can be from the earlier eras or today.
Yeah, well, I'm probably in the minority here, but I'm a Djokovic fan. I love his mental toughness. I just can't get over how somebody can will themselves time after time after time to wear down that other opponent and win. So I'm a big Djokovic fan, and I guess from the earlier days, because it was sort of by the beginning of my paying attention to tennis, it was probably Jimmy Connors. I like Jimmy, and he was a bad boy too, but
intense though.
But he was intense. He had the same fiery will to win, and I like that about it.
It's funny, the things you said about Djokovic, they apply to Jimmy as well.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, I agree.
So, Novak, are you happy that Dale likes you?
On the court as well as off the court, I try to always give my best to all four corners of the stadium, and it's a unique honor to hear these accolades from a man like Petroskey. I'm very, very, very privileged to be here, Craig. So thank you, Dale.
Very good. Yes. Very good. That was great. Love that.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's well, Rafa, what do you think about Dale not mentioning you?
Well, it's an obvious source of humility for me, no? So I welcome very much the fact that I was omitted from this conversation. I'm going to work hard, no?
Yes.
I'm going to come back. I'm going to try to impress Dale at the U.S. Open in about a month, no?
That is fantastic.
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Fun stuff. Yeah, he's got a couple of more. But that's we're running out of time. But because I wanted to ask you this last question.
Yeah.
This is always the culmination of our conversation with those who are on the podcast with us. If you were the commissioner of the Great Game, and the Great Game has been entrusted to you, speaking of the great game of tennis that we all love, is there anything that you would change? Can you see anything about tennis, professional, amateur, college, or you'd like it the way it is? Is it fine in where it's going right now?
I would say that one major improvement has been the automatic line calls. I think that has really helped tennis, taking out any guessing, taking out any of John McEnroe's rants against the umpires, right?
Yep.
Because and everybody, and I think it's cool that everybody can see it on the screen and they clap and then they see that it made it by a half a centimeter, right? Yeah. And because they wouldn't have believed it otherwise, right? So I think that's big. But my question to you guys is, why isn't everything called that way? In other words, why is there an umpire in any case anyway? Well, why do we have an umpire if the lines calls are made that way anyway?
Well, I think we're going to get to that point. Technology's I was showing something that to AJ. He was up on vacation just recently, and I sent him a text about this one little device you can put up on the fence. It looked pretty cool. And it can call lines. There's a couple of these. There's a guy out of Northern Cal that has a device also too. So I think you're going to see some things that develop into the opportunity for even amateur matches such as the Schmidt. Nobody misses line calls in the Schmidt on Saturday morning. I don't think. I've never. They've always been convivial, with at least from Dale and my standpoint, we've never missed a line call. But I think that what we're seeing even on clay, they can call the lines on clay. And what was there was a tournament recently. There were no lines people, and it was just straight.
There were, and this is probably what Dale is kind of lauding, is the idea that it is a human voice that's calling the ball in or out. Yes. In the Laver Cup, they happen to use the voice of the great Rod Laver himself. I thought that was awesome.
Wow. Yeah,
cool. That was really neat. And I'm with you. There was a part of me years ago, and this may sound like when you answered the question about the steroid era and the Hall of Fame, I was more like, but if you do the automation, you're going to miss out on the human element. No, I've totally changed on that, and I'm with you. And to dig a little deeper and answer your intelligent question about why is there still a chair umpire, it must be that that person is there to control the flow, the crowd. I don't think you need to announce the score because that can be automated as well. Yep. And what I see happening in the future is more automated line calling, score calling, and then the chair umpire might be more of an MC rather than an official. And if that's the direction we're going, I'm curious to see that.
Yeah, be kind of interesting.
Yeah, I'll give you from a baseball standpoint. I'm a big proponent of an electronic strike zone.
Yeah,
that's where I was going. I was going to go with that next.
And so when they get the technology right, I don't think we're quite there yet because it's a different kind of ball coming through in a different way than hitting a line.
Right.
But I believe the umpire behind the plate would just signal strike or ball. But be there also to make the calls at the plate when there are contested relay from the shortstop to get the runner coming in from third to be there. He'll be another base umpire, I guess what I'm saying. So I think that's what we're going to get to. I hope, because I think it'll be a better game once we get all these things right.
I am with you, and what a unique privilege and an honor to hang with Dale for a couple hours. Dale, that was really fun.
Yeah, thank you, Dale. We know you
made it so fun. I appreciate it.
Well.
And, my good friend Craig Bell, thanks for inviting me.
He's
Craig.
The man. I'm so happy we're all here together.
No, we appreciate you very much, and we could have gone in depth in a lot of different ways. We just scratched the surface, so maybe we can get you back at some point when you have a little bit more time.
We would love that.
It was happy Sunday. We'll look forward to seeing you probably next Saturday, maybe at the Schmidt.
I hope so.
Yeah, no, I'll probably be around somewhere, and we've got some nice swag for you coming also too.
Good.
So we're gonna make sure that you're at the net.
I like your logo. By the way, I like your logo.
Yeah, you're going to be all kitted out. Thank you.
Right.
It's
So
very cool.
well,
I love
thanks.
it.
Yeah,
So,
it's
all right, AJ, nice to meet you.
So,
What a pleasure. Thank you.
So
Look forward to meeting you in person.
Go have a great day out there in the 103-degree heat.
Okay, thanks.
102. It's only
102. Nice.
All right, Dale.
All right,
Take
bye,
care.
guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Yep. What a great guest, huh?
Craig Bell,
Yeah.
an amazing guest and a great get. Well done.
Oh my gosh, Dale! I knew he was going to be great, and we, like I said, we scratched this tiny surface,
I know.
just
we
barely.
Didn't go as deep, but we will. Part 2, Dale Petroskey.
Yes.
Folks at home, let us know what you thought, and if you have questions for the next time, we'll just archive them and get to them.
All right, so I guess it's about time to knock off and wish it was on a nighttime basis, but now we're in the afternoon. Thanks for listening to Season 1, Episode 125 of At the Net Podcast. Join us next week as we might be chilling and grilling. We might be doing whatever. Right?
And we'll also be with the Brothers on Tennis
yes.
on
Saturday.
Instagram. That's Saturday. That's 5 o'clock Central, 3 o'clock on the West Coast. It's actually 6 p.m. if you're in the East Coast. They will be from broadcasting live from the City Open in Washington, D.C. I'll probably be up at the Nationals in Kalamazoo.
I'll be
Craig
right
Bell
here.
right here in the studio.
I'll be right here in my office. I never leave my office. Also, join us on Wednesday evenings at 8 p.m. as we do a little thing called Tennis Shorts, don't we?
Can't wait for Tennis Shorts this Wednesday. So much to talk about. We were off last week, so join us on Instagram. That's at 8 Central.
Also, be sure to like and follow us on Facebook. I said FaceTube last time. So
Yeah, that was good. I like that. What about U-Book?
U-Book.
Yeah.
All right, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and other social media outlets. Plus, tell a friend or friend, as we want everybody to be a nethead, right?
We do. And you'll see a post this week. It's like, hey, this is what you look like before you watch At the Net Podcast. Here's what you look like after. So look for that and find that joy and go have a great week, everybody. We'll catch you Saturday.
And that's the tennis news as it seems to us. Good afternoon.